We have a quorum, Commissioner.
Okay, we do have a quorum. Very good. Well, since we have a quorum, I'd like to call the meeting to order. And the first item of business is approval of the minutes from May 12th, 2020. And I move to approve. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. And any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Seeing none, 2A is approved. Item 2B is approval of the minutes from April 14th. I move to approve. Do I have a second?
Second it.
Okay. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Minutes are approved. Next item is item 2C, Director Report.
Thank you, Chair. And the board members, the first item on the report is to report to you what's the status on the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. Under your leadership, WAMPO staff are on tasks in completing the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, also known as Reimagined Move 2040. Even during the times of past couple of months, during the COVID situation, staff was very busy in completing this document because it is due for adoption in June. We want to provide you the status on these documents. There were many reports that are already available. We want to also be sure the document is more accurate. So your review will help us achieve the greater level of accuracy, or if you are missing any. So you can see this cycle, the adoption of the plan is scheduled for June 2020. And the next cycle of the plan would be in 5 years from now, that's June 2025. What we are planning after the adoption of this plan is forming some committees such as Safety Committee and Freight Committee and Infrastructure, Transportation Infrastructure Committees. These will help us update the reports for the next plan as well. And I may be, staff may be reaching out to you, what committees are important for the region, how we all can update the next plan the way we did this plan. For today, there is there are many components to Metropolitan Transportation Plan. Today, there will be a presentation by Chris on safety data that is part of the transportation system performance. Transportation system performance, on the next slide, has various components to it, like safety data, infrastructure conditions assessment, and congestion and air quality. So today there will be a presentation on how MPOs are required to monitor safety data, such as the crashes that are occurring within the region. So that's all on MTP for the moment. There is more upcoming, in more detailed presentations upcoming. The next item is a tip update. That item, as you all know, is progressing along with the long-range plan. Transportation Improvement Program document is 4-year implementation part, which is the funding commitments for the next 4 years. So the process of coordination among various entities, both local jurisdictions as well as Department of Transportation, Kansas Department of Transportation, all of us have put together various components of this document as well. And the next cycle of this tip update would be 2 years from now. That is on the next slide. That is June 2022. And the next tip cycle would be from 2023 to 2026. So there will be an update on this today. And this also is planned for adoption in the month of June. by this body. Okay, thank you. That's on the tip update. And the next item is information. It's webinar series that's in your packets. Thank you. Next slide, please. And this has a professional development survey. This survey was sent to all, and it's also on our website. There's still time. I think the survey is closing in May 20. So we still have 8 more days or so. And this would help what type of training or professional development classes can be planned for our region and for our members. One of the advantages of this is taking advantage of this LTAP program is how do we help board members in onboarding members, like introducing to the planning process, to transportation planning process and the NPO processes. So there are many opportunities. So please feel free to participate in the survey. That's all on that item. Thank you. This item on build grant application is to support City of Wichita and Sedgwick County for the this grant application for the North Junction. We are all very supportive. So Mike Armour is here to provide us insight, and this will help us all to keep in the loop in ways we can support in the future in this application process. So Chairman, if we have your permission, Mike Armour is here to present this item.
That'd be great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chad. Hopefully this is sharing now, is that correct? The North Junction, everyone's, I think, pretty familiar with the project. It actually is composed of 4 phases, which are the green project, the accelerated gold, the gold project, which is what the build grant is for, and then the last purple project. The green project is currently under construction. It was aimed at some bridges that needed to be replaced. It's on the kind of the west leg of the overall North Junction interchange. The accelerated gold project is shown in that orange color on the map. It is addressing the PM breakdown in traffic that has to go through that tight loop ramp currently. So it will reconstruct that tight loop ramp to instead be a dual lane flyover, which again should take care of that PM congestion that backs up pretty routinely on northbound I-135. Construction of that project is anticipated to begin in 2021, or slated to begin with the award of that construction funding from the 2019 cost share program from KDOT. And then we have the gold project. Again, that is this, the focus of our build grant that we are applying for. And then the last project shown on that map is the purple project. No construction funding is identified for that project. Design is only in the preliminary stages to make sure that all proposed improvements fit together with the current design projects. Here's a little bit of a more detailed overview of the gold project. This is a cut sheet from our build grant application. Essentially, the remaining gold that is not being taken care of or being fixed with the accelerated gold is the morning or the AM congestion highlighted here. So you have the northbound I-235 that essentially needs to go to eastbound K96. However, if anyone's driven that in the morning, you see what happens. You have to merge onto southbound I-135 for a moment just to continue on to eastbound K96. So the proposed gold project will eliminate the need to mix with I-135 traffic via a collector distributor road. You'll also have improved connections from westbound K96 to go both northbound and southbound. Both of those ramps will be reconstructed. To go southbound, currently you have to use a loop ramp. That will be replaced with a dual lane flyover ramp. And then the last crucial element of the gold project improvements is an auxiliary lane all the way south until 21st Street interchange. A little bit of the details of our grant application. This is now our third grant application. We began submitting a grant application in 2018, which was a build grant. We were unsuccessful. There were some modifications that the Fed said we should try to do. Then we applied again in 2019 for the infra grant. We heard more favorable results from our application. However, that 2019 infra grant was highly competitive. Only, I believe, 10 or 11 awards were given for the entire country. So not even every state obviously received an award. This year we are applying back to the build grant. It's a little bit less of an award, but it is a little bit less competitive because more awards are given out. The due date is May 18th. The maximum award is what we're asking for is $25 million. Again, this represents a partnership of the City of Wichita and Sedgwick County, who are the joint applicants. And in our application, we commit combined local funding of $15 million. KDOT's local funding is, I believe, $46 million for a total of $61 million in local funds. Awards probably won't be announced until later this year, probably sometime in the fall. We had at the TAC, I presented this same build grant as an update and had solicited letters of support. If some agency is out there or some community would like to still submit a letter of support to us for this project, there's still time and it would be greatly appreciated. Please send those to me as soon as possible. And there's my email address. We have a template ready that I could send to you, and all you would need to do is put it on your letterhead and maybe add a sentence or two about your organization or your community. Here's an example one from Wesley. I show you. They turned this around in pretty short order, and it was a great letter of support for us to include in our application. And I put there 28 letters, but I got another one yesterday from El Dorado, so we're actually at 29 letters of support so far. And that's pretty much the update on the gold project. There's been so much support for this North Junction project overall, and I do want to say a special thank you to all of those that have championed this project. The Wichita Regional Chamber of Commerce has been huge in pushing for this at the state and national level. And then I also want to give a nod out to all of those communities and businesses and organizations that have sent us a letter of support for this agreed upon regional priority. And with that, Chad, thank you for letting me speak and update the TPB on this, and I'll hand it back over to you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Chairman. I know from working from past MPOs, I know that the local contribution is a success, one of the success factors for the application. And I also learned from the previous MPO applications that even when the application goes to Washington, D.C., there were some calls made from the local entities in support. So those two are a couple of factors that success grant application. So thanks, Mike, for your leadership on this. The next item is an informational item. in your packets on, let me see the slide. Oh, it's the PWP that's in progress and that's in completion in your packets. Next slide, please. We have bicycle and pedestrian count season that's coming. That's, volunteers are needed for September 24 and 26. Tricia Thomas is working on having all the volunteers. So we'll be reaching out to you because it's all modes of transportation are important. So hardly bike ped counts are counted. You visually count cars and transit ridership and all. So this will be a great help, and we'll reach out to you more on this item. Okay. That's all I think we have on the director's report.
Very good. Do you have anything else?
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Chad. Appreciate the update. The next item on the agenda is a public comment opportunity, and I understand that Alan Kaler, Bike Walk Wichita, would like to speak to us today. Alan, welcome.
Thank you. So I am Alan Kaler, and I'm president of Bike Walk Wichita. And I just wanted to take this chance to thank WAMPO, its staff, this board, and the Transportation Advisory Committee for your support of bicycle and pedestrian related projects in the Wichita area, and urge you to continue that support. I made some similar remarks to the TAC a couple of weeks ago. I apologize, Troy, for the repetition here. And I've sent a letter to you that I believe you have in your materials, but I wanted to express our thanks directly to you as well. As we say in our letter, we appreciate that the majority of the road and bridge projects that WAMPO has funded include bicycle and pedestrian amenities. And we also greatly appreciate that since 2014, WAMPO has funded a dozen dedicated bicycle and pedestrian path and bridge projects. Both the road projects and the bike and pedestrian paths have significantly improved the safety for biking and walking in the Wichita area. So we thank you for that. But we would especially like to commend WAMPO's focus on walkable places. Excuse me. Although that focus has involved a relatively small amount of funding, we believe this emphasis has the most potential for positively impacting the Wichita area's economics, attraction and retention of talent, and health and safety. WAMPO's support of walkable places was reflected in the vision and outcome statement that was adopted last fall. That vision statement includes 5 criteria, most of which emphasize the need to increase the opportunities for active transportation, such as biking and walking. And similarly, the Reimagined Move 2040 document that's included in your packet today highlights several benefits of walkable places, including a note that the option to live in denser walkable areas supported by pedestrian, bicycle, and transit alternatives has a high level of influence on attracting and retaining quality talent. And then finally, since 2017, WAMPO has funded 20 projects under its Planning Walkable Places program that Chad just mentioned. We strongly support these types of projects. They're the cheapest and most efficient ways to accomplish the stated goals of WAMPO and its constituent communities. Communities that encourage biking and walking are stronger socially, economically, and they're healthier and they're safer. And we've actually seen this demonstrated in the current crisis. One of the effects of the stay-at-home order is that we've seen a dramatic increase in people biking and walking outdoors. Socially, this has resulted in really all of us having more connections with our neighbors. From a health standpoint, we've been walking and biking more, getting healthier. And economically, we've seen the importance of our local businesses, but also their fragility and the need to support them. The focus on walkable, bikeable places helps create a sense of community and these health and economic benefits. These are the goals of the vision and outcome statement that WAMPO has adopted and of the planning walkable places projects that you've approved. So again, we thank you for your funding of walkable places and active transportation and encourage you to continue that focus. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Alan. I appreciate it very much. Does anyone have any questions? See any? Next, I don't know that there was anyone else that would like to speak during public comment, but at this time, if there is someone else who would like to speak during public comment, we'll give you an opportunity at this time. Seeing no one, we'll move on to the next item. Item 4A is an update from Chris Upchurch. Chris, you online?
Yep, I'm here. One sec, let me get the slide switched over. All right. So this is a red letter day. We are here with our new Metropolitan Transportation Plan. This is the culmination of more than 2 years of effort by WAMPO staff, by our committees, by all of you on the board, to come up with a plan that is going to look at transportation in our region for the next 20 years, Move 2040 Reimagined. We have the plan document, the core document of the plan is in your packet, but I'd like to just go through briefly and hit the high points. And first high point is the vision, to build a safe transportation system that increases quality of place and supports the economy of the Wichita region and South Central Kansas. And we came up with this vision starting a year and a half ago with our big public engagement push. Since then, we've talked to dozens of groups, including city councils, county commissions, and other stakeholders groups, hundreds of people in total. We've had thousands of online interactions, so just a huge amount of interaction with the public, more than any previous long-range plan that we've done. So this public engagement is one of the pillars of this plan. The other pillar is our performance-based planning process. This is the process where we use our performance measures to inform future planning. And while we have a lot of performance measures, we really zeroed in on 3 to help inform the development of the next plan. First, on safety, looking at our safety figures. Unfortunately, their fatalities are increasing, though serious injuries are going down. We'll talk more about safety in a later agenda item. On infrastructure condition, this is an area where we don't have the best data, but based on what we can glean from KDOT and from the city of Wichita, the pavement conditions in this region are declining. And finally, on congestion, we have some localized bottlenecks, the North Junction most prominent among them, which you heard about from Mike Armour a little earlier. But it's not really a broad problem in our region the way it is in some other areas. So based on these 2 pillars, on the public engagement and on the performance-based planning, we came up with these 5 focus areas for the plan: safety and health, mobility and the economy, equity and diversity, the multimodal network, and quality of place and talent. So these are sort of the 5 areas that we're concentrating on with every aspect of this new plan. Now, the next part of the plan document itself is a regional snapshot looking at the Wichita region broadly. I'm not going to go into too much detail here. We talk about our economy, our population. We spend quite a bit of time talking about some of the same trends that we've been talking about with this body over the past 4 or 5 years. Things like our graying population, you can see in the graphic there. Again, I won't go into a whole lot of time recapitulating that. The other thing we've done is draw on some of the other regional plans and initiatives, things like the Chung Report, Project Wichita, the Community Investment Plan, linking up with those and teasing out common themes. So moving from the Wichita region broadly, specifically to our transportation system, we have a State of the System report where we talk about what the transportation system in Wichita is like today. And just to break it up by mode here, for the highways, we talk about things like our lack of congestion and those safety performance measures that we talked about earlier. And then for each mode, we have some key takeaways. For the highways, for instance, those include safety, issues with deferred maintenance, upgrading roadways to meet current needs, and technology. On the bicycle and pedestrian side, the takeaways are safety, again, expanding the network and making connections, doing placemaking, gathering data, And there's also a recommendation that WAMPO update our regional pathways plan. This is the plan for all bicycling and pedestrian in the whole WAMPO region. We last updated that in 2010, so that's grown a little long in the tooth. It's probably time to revisit that. For transit and paratransit, our takeaways were doing better on travel time, increasing coordination, and increasing accessibility. On the freight side, very important to our economy, we sort of broke this up by mode. Those included truck freight, where we identified truck parking and last mile delivery as takeaways. For rail, looking at infrastructure condition and the possibility of passenger rail in our region. And then on the air travel side, a new customs facility for Eisenhower Airport and increasing commercial air service. Now, this body has spent a lot of time over the past year considering what our major regional priorities should be, and we really highlight those decisions in this document. Of course, the highest regional priority is the North Junction project. Again, we've already heard about that today. But we also touch on the other priorities that the board identified, including ARC 95, East Kellogg, 235 in Kellogg, K96, K254, the Northwest Bypass, US 54 and I-135, and West Kellogg. So moving from the big priorities to some more specific projects, everything that's in our short-range 4-year transportation improvement plan also has to be in the MTP. You can see them on the map here. Kristen will be talking to you about the TIP in a couple of minutes, so I'm not going to steal her thunder. Looking out a little longer, the WAMPO funding menu, that's the list of our projects that are eligible to receive WAMPO funding. You can see here on the map and some of the breakdowns by type of project and by jurisdiction. We talk about those. I can't talk about transportation without talking about money. Our plan is fiscally constrained. That is the federal requirement we have to meet, that we bring in more money than we plan on spending. We also identified some other takeaways. The fact that the local share of the transportation revenue burden is increasing. Our purchasing power is going down, basically because inflation is rising faster than revenues are. There's some questions about how our investments are balanced. Among the different modes, we tend to spend a lot on highways, even though we talk a lot about things like bicycle and pedestrian and transit. Also, the balance between maintaining what we have and building new projects and new capacity. And that brings up the last two items here: deferred maintenance activities that are getting pushed out into the future, and adequately operating and maintaining our current system. Finally, we took a look at equity considerations. We located all of the low-income, minority, and limited English proficiency concentrations in the Wichita region and did some analysis to establish that the projects we're planning on building won't have a disproportionate negative impact on those communities. So to sum it all up, over the next 20 years, the WAMPO region will face significant transportation challenges, from changing demographics, the need to attract and retain talent, increasing roadway fatalities, and declining purchasing power of our transportation funding. To meet these challenges, we're focused on those 5 areas: safety and health, the multimodal network, mobility and economy, equity and diversity, and quality of place and talent. So that is a very brief summary of the core document. Now, as I mentioned, that document is in your packet. Staff have worked very hard to make it shorter and more readable. It is basically a night and day contrast with our old MTP Move 2040 that was a document that was a couple inches thick. This is much more digestible, and you saw some of the fruits of that effort in this presentation. We would welcome any comments that all of you members of the policy body have on this. We're happy to hear what you think. But we would also appreciate it if you can get the word out, pass this on to your constituents, to stakeholder groups, anyone you think would be interested. We want to get this out there as broadly as possible. Now, with the current situation, we can't really go out there in front of public meetings the way we had intended to do when the plan document came out. So we're really relying on you to help us publicize this and push this out as broadly as possible. And finally, next month, this will be an action item. We'll come to the policy body and ask you to approve the new MTP. And that's really going to be the culmination of more than 2 years of effort by staff, by committee members, by the policy body, and by members of the public. It really is quite the milestone. So I certainly hope you will all be here for that. So any questions on the new MTP or our core document?
Chris, I don't hear any questions right now. I don't see anything popping up on the chat. I appreciate all the work that you and the staff have done and everyone that's been involved in this. Congratulations, and we look forward to approving this next month.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item, we have Kristen on, talk about the TIP program. Kristen, you available?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Give us just a minute to get the screen switched over. Okay, very good. Before I jump into the TIP presentation, I did just want to remind everyone, if you haven't yet had a chance to sign into the chat box, we encourage you to do that so we can have a written record of our meeting today of all the attendees. So I'm filling in for Bethany on passing along those reminders. So we would appreciate you taking the time to type your name and affiliation into the chat box. Okay, with that, let's switch gears over to the TIP. I am pleased to be here today to present an update on the 2021 to 2024 Transportation Improvement Program. During today's presentation, we will review the purpose of the TIP, the process we use to develop this TIP update, specifics of this TIP update, individual projects, and next steps. So the sole purpose of the TIP is to document what projects, programs, and strategies are being implemented from the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, or MTP. So the TIP shows which specific projects will be implemented, what year they will be implemented, and which entity has committed to pay for their implementation. It really shows how the communities in our region are working together with the Kansas Department of Transportation and with WAMPO to invest our federal, state, and local tax dollars into the regional transportation system. As you can see from this slide, our MTP has 4 different categories of projects. There's the WAMPO funding menu, local and state programs and projects, major regional priorities, and planning recommendations. The TIP condenses these 4 categories into 2, WAMPO funding commitments and state and local commitments. This is the second TIP to have implemented the current MTP, Move 2040, and this will be the first TIP to start implementing our new MTP, Reimagine Move 2040, that Chris just briefed you about. So specifically, this TIP is implementing 7% of our current TIP, of our current MTP, Move 2040, and it's also planning to implement 15% of our new MTP, Reimagine. So now that we have a sense of the purpose of the TIP, let's switch gears and review the process that we used to develop it. And we started this back in November, and we followed 2 different processes depending on which category of projects were in the TIP. So that top row shows the process we used for the state and local funding commitments. We reached out to the Kansas Department of Transportation, to Wichita Transit, and to local governments to include their projects they'd like to in our TIP. And then the second process we followed is shown on the bottom row there for the WAMPO funding commitment. And for that, we followed the WAMPO funding cycle processes. And as you can see, we're here in May, and we're down to the final document and public comment period. Let's go through just a couple specifics here. The first one has to do with the time period. So this TIP will cover projects that are planned for implementation between October 1st of this year and September 30th of 2024. That time period does cover the 4 federal fiscal years of 21, 22, 23, and 24. And that's actually how we get the name of the TIP, is which federal fiscal years it's covering. Now let's review some of the highlights. This TIP includes $454 million of investment into our regional transportation system. It includes 88 individual projects and programs. There are 4 funding sources that have committed to pay for the projects in the TIP. They include federal funding, funding from the state of Kansas, funding from local governments, and also funding from private and nonprofit paratransit providers. You can see the pie chart on the right there shows the breakdown of the different funding sources. And you can see on the left that KDOT provides the majority of the funding for projects in the TIP through their federal and state government funding. Local governments provide the next largest share, and then WAMPO's, the federal funding that WAMPO's awards comes in at about 15% of the total. And I did want to note that the cost estimates that we show in our TIP do account for anticipated inflation. Here's a breakdown of the projects by type that are in the TIP. So this is shown in 2 ways. There's a table on the left and the pie chart on the right. You can see that highways do make up the largest share of projects by type in our TIP at about $176 million. Road projects are the next largest share, at about $166 million, or about 35%. Transit comes in with the 3rd largest share at about $60 million, or 13%. And the rest of the categories measure at 5% or less of the total. The TIP does include projects all over the region. They're taking place on the local road system, on the public transit system, and on the state highway system. Let's take a little bit of a look on a specific subset of projects in the TIP. These are the WAMPO funded projects. So out of the 88 total projects, there's 29 projects that are funded with WAMPO funding. That equates to about $64 million of WAMPO funding commitments. And after we account for the local match that's paid for by the project sponsor and the pre-construction costs, that equates to a total investment of about $127 million in the regional system. If we break down the WAMPO funded projects by area, here's the pie chart that shows that. You can see suburban communities have about a little over 50% of the total WAMPO funding awards in this TIP, with the city of Wichita coming in at about 25% of the total awards, and Butler and Sedgwick County accounting for about 11%. This pie chart looks very similar to the one we saw at the last meeting where we looked at the WAMPO funding awards. And lastly, wanted to show the breakdown of the projects by type of the WAMPO funded projects in our new TIP. You can see the supermajority of projects, about 90%, are road projects, with the other types of projects coming in at less than 3%. WAMPO is investing all over the region. You can see that the projects highlighted in purple are the WAMPO funded projects. We've got projects taking place in Andover, in Bel Air, Derby, Hayesville, Keachai, Mays, Park City, Valley Center, Wichita, unincorporated Sedgwick County, on the Whichway Traffic Management Center, and Wichita Transit, and also through WAMPO. If you would like to check out the individual projects, if you want to look at all of the 88 projects or one specifically, feel free to log on to the WAMPO Project Tracker website. The link is shown there. It's also in your staff report. When you click on the Amendments tab, you'll see there's 3 links of draft project lists. You'll want to click on the one that's associated with the 2021 to 2024 TIP, and also the one associated with the 2019 to 2022 TIP Amendment 6. So our new TIP won't go into effect until October 1st, and so we will need to continue to make amendments to the TIP that's currently in effect. And once those amendments are finalized, we will roll them into the new TIP. And lastly, I just wanted to share our approval process with you. We're here today with an update to the board. We updated your TAC committee at their last meeting in April. This document is out for public comment and review. I would just like to echo what Chris said. We welcome your input on the TIP. We would encourage you to share it with your constituents and partners. This public comment period is open through May 29th, so we'd appreciate any sharing you could do. And then we'll be back next month to ask you to take final action on the TIP document, and it will go into effect on October 1st of this year, which is the first day of federal fiscal year 2021. So with that, I'm glad to answer any questions anyone on the board might have on our proposed 2021 to 2024 TIP.
Thank you, Kristen. Any questions at all? I don't hear anyone, and I don't see anyone on chat to asking questions. So we want to thank you very much. We look forward to the final update next month with our next TPB and final approval. Thanks for all the work. We appreciate it.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item, we're back to Chris again, talking about safety performance measures. Chris, you still on?
Yes, I'm still here. And looks like my slides are sharing. That's good. So I'm here to talk to you today about safety performance measures. We're sort of diving from the real big picture stuff with the MTP down to the very fine details here. This is part of our performance-based planning process, which I mentioned earlier in the MTP presentation. That's where we measure performance based on our goals and use the results to inform future planning. Now, in this case, we're talking about 5 of our performance measures. These are the federally mandated safety performance measures. They're the number of fatalities, the fatality rate, the number of serious injuries, the serious injury rate, and the number of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. And by non-motorized there, we basically mean bicyclists and pedestrians. We have to set targets for these every year, and I also like to use that as a time to come before you and talk about how we're doing on safety. It's an important topic, and I do think once a year is a good time period to just come before you and keep it front of mind. Now, in terms of setting targets, there's really 3 ways to do it for performance measures. We can set targets based on the current trends. We can set targets expecting to change the current trends. So example, if we were setting a target for bridge condition and we're spending a bunch of money this year to repair certain bridges, we'd expect the trend in bridge condition to change, or at least we hope it would. And finally, you can set aspirational targets. This is common in the safety area, things like Vision Zero, the idea that the only acceptable number of fatalities in the transportation system is 0. However, in this case, the federal government has required that we set actual targets. We can't do the aspirational targets. Those are off the table. In terms of setting targets expecting to change current trends, we are setting targets for 2020, for this year, and we're not spending enough, or we haven't spent in the past enough to expect to change the trends that are happening right now. So we are really setting these targets based on current trends. And it's important to think of these targets not sort of in terms of a pass-fail type of deal. Particularly for MPOs, there are really no consequences for missing your target. The targets are really there to provide context for the performance measures. So when you look at a figure for how many fatalities we've had, it provides an easy benchmark to say, okay, is that a good number? Is that a bad number? Is that better than we expect or worse than we expect? So to delve into the technical minutiae here, the safety performance measures use a 5-year rolling average. So if you were looking at the safety performance measure number for 2016, you would look at that year and the previous 4 years, so those 5 years, 2012 to 2016, add them all up, divide by 5, and that will give you your 5-year rolling average. So in this case, we are setting targets for 2020. That means we would look at the rolling average for 2016 through 2020, those 5 years. Now, sort of the odd part here, we already have data through 2018. KDOT has not yet provided the data for 2019 yet, even though that year is closed out. So we have data for 2016, 17, and 18. The only unknowns here are 2019 and 2020. With that out of the way, talking about our 5 measures here, start with the number of fatalities. As you can sort of tell from the graph, the news here isn't great. We have had a strong upward trend in fatalities starting back around 2011. And we saw this trend when we set the initial targets, so we knew that the number of fatalities would probably increase. We set our first targets covering the years 2014 through 2018. Set the targets for expecting or hoping for no more than 54 fatalities per year during that period. Unfortunately, the actual average was 58.6, so we are above the target. We exceeded our target level for that year. Now, if you extrapolate from the upward pointing part of that graph there, from 2011 to 2016, we would expect around 66.2 fatalities per year in the 2016 to 2020 period. That's what we would expect. And so the staff recommended target is in line with those expectations of no more than 66 fatalities per year. The next measure closely related is fatality rate. And the idea here is rather than looking at the raw number of fatalities, we look at the fatalities per mile driven, or in this case, the fatalities per 100 million vehicle miles traveled. This is really to account for the fact that if you are in an area where VMT is growing rapidly, where your population is growing, the amount of driving is growing, you've got a lot of sprawl, your fatality numbers may be going up even as your roads are actually getting safer. Your fatalities per mile driven are going down. In WAMPO's case, though, our region, while our number of vehicle miles traveled is growing, it's more on the slow and steady type of growth than the rapid growth you see some other places. So the chart for fatalities rate doesn't really look much different than the chart for fatalities. And we see about the same things here. We see that strong upward trend starting in 2011. You can see that we exceeded our target for 2014 to 2018. The target was 1.13 fatalities per 100 million vehicle miles traveled. The actual number was 1.22 fatalities. Again, if you extrapolate from the upward pointing part of that line from 2011 to 2018, would expect about 1.35 fatalities per year per 100 million VMT, and that is what the staff recommendation is. So moving on to some better news, the number of serious injuries, we have been seeing a long-term sustained decline in our region. And that has been continuing, though there is perhaps a slight sign of it leveling off. So if you, I do want to emphasize just how big an achievement this is. If you look back on the left side of the graph there from 2008 to 2012, our first 5-year period, we saw more than 230 serious injuries per year during that 5-year period. Or if you look at the actual number from 2014 to 2018, it's down to 138, or excuse me, 146.8 per year. So a decrease of more than 80 serious injuries per year. And these are very serious injuries. These are the sorts of motor vehicle injuries that are really life-changing. So avoiding 80 of those per year is a pretty big achievement. As I said, we do seem to be leveling off a bit. The number is still going down, but maybe not going down as quickly as it had been in the past. And that does mean the actual number is a little higher than our target. We had set our target for the 2014 to 2018 period at 138. The actual number was a bit higher than that, 146.8. Based on that long-term trend, we'd expect 113.1 in the per year in the 2016 to 2020 period. As I said, there's some sign in the data that this is maybe leveling out, so the staff recommendation is a little higher than that. Still lower than where we are right now, but a bit higher than the projection, just to be on the conservative side there. The staff recommendation is no more than 123 serious injuries per year during that time period. Again, with the serious injury rate, we're compensating for any increases in vehicle miles traveled. As I said, in the WAMPO region, that doesn't tend to make a huge difference. You still see the same overall declining trend here. We're still a little bit above where we thought we'd be in 2014 to 2018. And for the recommended target, we're looking at 2.4 per year for 100 million VMT. So another piece of good news is the non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. Again, these are the fatalities and serious injuries among bicyclists and pedestrians, our most vulnerable road users. When we initially set targets for this, we had been looking at several 5-year periods of rapid increases. You can see that upward trend there from around 2010 to 2014 to 2012 to 2016. And that's why we set those blue dots so high. We set the target at 35 per year for the 2014 to 2018 period. As it turns out, we have leveled off. So rather than continuing that increase, we've held steady around 28, 29 per year. So the actual figure for 2014 to 2018 is 28.2 per year, substantially below the target that we had set. So based on this leveling off and seeing it leveling off for several 5-year periods in a row here, as staff, we think we can bring that target down, bring it down from 35 down to 29 per year for the 2016 to 2020 period. That is the staff recommendation. And because we haven't seen more than 29 serious injuries and fatalities per year among the non-motorized users during any time since the 2012 to 2016 period, we actually think that's kind of a conservative target to set there. So that's our safety performance, both the actual performance and our targets. I'm happy to answer any questions on that, and once we do that, then we can move on to the action item here.
Very good. I thank Chris. Do we have any questions whatsoever before we move to approve the safety performance, or is there any changes that anyone would like to see?
I would just want, this is Donna Klassen. I was just wondering, where do motorcycles, do they come in the motorized vehicles?
Yes, they're motorized vehicles. That's kind of the distinction there between the motorcycles and the bicyclists, even though they're both two-wheeled vehicles. The motorized ones would go in the all fatalities and all serious injuries numbers, and the bicyclists go in the non-motorized section.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other questions?
Yep, this is Cindy Claycomb. I have a question. Chris, remind me again what we use these performance measures for.
So we use them, like I said, to inform future planning. Safety in particular is one of the ones that we used fairly extensively during our outreach for the new long-range plan. So we use that pretty extensively to do that. We also it can be informative when we as a group and this policy body are trying to decide how to prioritize things like safety improvements. They can help us weigh that against other figures. I'd say those are the two main areas that we use them.
Well, it's a little alarming to me that the trends are going up, and I know you said we need to set targets based on what's happening, but I don't know how we change those if we continue to set targets that go up.
Yeah, so one of the things that is a little difficult with the federal measures is they are essentially asking us to set very short-range targets. Like I said, we're setting a target for this year, and really because it's based on the 5-year rolling average, a lot of that is already locked in. There's not much we can do right now to affect what the number in 2020 is going to be. One of the things that I would like to do, Chad mentioned the safety committee earlier, is one of the things WAMPO would like to be doing moving forward, is to work with them to start looking at safety in a more long-term type of thing, where we do have time to make investments and predict what sort of changes that those investments, what sort of effects those investments in safety would have on our performance over the next 5 or 10 years, rather than these little 1 year at a time targets. Give us a chance to actually bend the curve, so to speak, on safety performance.
And if I may chime in, that's a great question.
Please.
How do we reduce these crashes is a great question. There are many ways to do it. One of the ways is having safety committee identify what are the underlying causes for these crashes. So diving deeper into these data and where are these occurring, working with local jurisdictions. There's work to do, and this presentation by Chris is meant for federal requirements monitoring the region. So while we are doing this, it brings us all together. How do we address this, and how do we make sure we reduce these crashes and improve the safety? So it's a great question, and thank you for your question. And this is an ongoing work. Thank you.
Chad and Chris, Rick Backlund here, Federal Highways. Had a couple quick comments. Overall, great presentation. And Chris, as you talked about the 5-year rolling average, I mean, one thing to also consider is that the time period takes us from when we had that economic downturn up through 2015. The economy was improving, folks were traveling more, the price of gasoline dropped, so VMT was higher. So frankly, I'm not surprised to see the higher fatality and serious injury rates. Going forward, we all know what's been going on over the last few months and what may continue through 2020. So as the data continues to refine, we may in fact see drops in fatalities and serious injuries because of the stay-at-home orders going forward. So just would make a comment about that we might see actually a dipping down because of the current circumstances. The other thing I would suggest is, I know that Federal Highways has documents and guidances on what we call safety conscious planning. So in other words, if you're doing a corridor study and you have known documented high fatalities, serious injuries in those corridors, we do have guidance that can make recommendations on traffic calming and other types of installations of signing and other things to help reduce, to make the corridor more visible, especially for pedestrians, bicyclists, and to create more of a sense of for the driver to reduce speed. So just offer that we do have some guidance, and you know, we're certainly available to provide those if needed. So just some feedback.
Any other questions for Chris? I don't see any other questions. I move that we approve the proposed performance targets. Do I have a second? State your name.
Second, Cindy Claycomb.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Appreciate it. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor state aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing no one, we've approved the performance targets. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We have another update today. Kelly Rundell. We have been working with Kelly for some time on the employee manual, the executive committee. I'll give part of my executive committee briefing right now. Yes, we have been looking at this for several months. Kelly has helped put it together, and we've reviewed it several times. And it is now we're going to be presenting it to the entire TPB. So, Kelly, if you're on, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
I am on. Just go in here. Okay. Oops. So the committee has asked for a comprehensive employment manual. This is for several reasons. One had to do with the fact that WAMPO has moved to being a more standalone organization. And also because when Chad came, I think he found several manuals that had maybe inconsistent provisions, and wanted to make sure that the manual was up to date in compliance with all applicable laws. So, and I am not able to change pages here. Kristen, can you help me?
Yes, sure thing. Give me a minute and we'll switch back to the other screen.
She's doing that. I'll go ahead and tell you. We made several things were significant changes. A lot of them were just make sure we were in compliance with the law. One of them had to do with the classification of employees. The Fair Labor Standards Act requires that employees be classified as exempt or non-exempt. And so we set out that clarification in the manual, also recognizing that the other employees might be temporary employees or seasonal employees. The manual also lays out a hiring process. Kansas law requires that there be a veteran's preference for public employment. So there is a process set out in the manual for that. It also includes background checks. This manual has a 180-day probationary period to allow the new employee to get acclimated and everyone to make sure they get trained well, but also to deal with them maybe a little more directly than you might with someone who's been around a little longer. This manual updates the compensatory time program. Federal law does allow people to get comp time. Now, comp time is when you work overtime. In the private sector, you're paid time and a half when you work over 40 hours. But for government employers, they can get comp time, which is 1.5 hours of time off instead of getting paid time and a half. So we do have that plan in here. Now, the thing is that federal law only allows that to be given to non-exempt employees. Those are the hourly employees. So that's laid out in there, and that it can't be mandatory. So one of the appendix items to this manual is a request for employees to complete if they want to have a comp time instead of being paid overtime. Obviously, since we're in this pandemic time, we're all really understanding alternative work schedules. This manual got started a little bit before that, and we included a process to request an alternative work schedule so that the director can have, be aware of what people are working and manage everyone's time well. The manual does include evaluation process, and if there's a need, allows for a performance improvement plan. I think these are common in the workplace. A lot of the next items that are on this page are also very ordinary for any workplace. There's the email usage policy. There's a policy regarding the misuse of WAMPO's information and resources. There's a drug-free workplace policy that includes alcohol as well as misuse of prescription medication. And it does provide for testing under certain circumstances. There's, of course, policies against workplace violence, harassment, and bullying. Okay, Kristen, can you change pages for me? The next thing that I've covered here is benefits. Both full-time and part-time employees would be eligible for benefits, but not the interns or summer interns or temporary employees that come in for a particular project. It has 11 days of holiday pay and a personal day. Those are all federal holidays. We've outlined a military leave policy, which is consistent with federal requirement of USERRA for people who may have military reasons to leave. The bereavement leave policy is set out in there for specific family members. It's up to 4-day leave. The retirement plan is the same that was adopted, I think, when WAMPO was developed. WAMPO matches 4.7% of the employees' contributions to their 457 plan. The insurance program was just described what has been going on, I think, throughout. Their insurance program renews at the first of the year every year, and I have described here what percentage of the premiums are paid by WAMPO in that. On the next page, Kristen, thanks. The next page is what the vacation and sick leave provisions are. Now, I think the executive committee, I know they looked at Sedgwick County and Wichita's vacation and sick leave. They probably looked at some other communities that they were familiar with and came up with these leave provisions. They're very consistent, I think, with some of these governmental entities. The hours and, the hours would be adjusted for part-time employees. So if they work 20 hours a week instead of 40 hours a week, then their vacation leave would be adjusted accordingly. It does allow for up to 160 hours of being carried over for vacation leave. The next page, one of the big things we've added here is ethics. There are a number of provisions here. We have a confidentiality provision. Basically, it's sort of a need to know and to protect the information provided by the people who make proposals and things like that. We've added a nepotism policy and describing how we're going to deal with personal relationships and relatives in the workplace. There is a provision in there regarding outside employment. It doesn't prohibit outside employment, but it does talk about employment with someone who might be presenting something to WAMPO or dealing with WAMPO or an adversarial relationship with WAMPO. So that is in there. The next thing on that list there is a statement of substantial interest. The statement itself is included as an appendix to the manual. This is a statement that's required by Kansas law. I'm sure a lot of you have already seen this form like this. It basically requires that employees describe what their interests are and that statement be available. So if someone needed to if someone wanted to claim that someone had a conflict of interest, then that would already be outlined there. Finally, we have developed a code of ethics. This is a separate attachment as an appendix to the manual. It describes limitations on gifts, lobbying, gifts of meals, tickets to entertainment and sporting events. This was developed basically by looking at KDOT's ethics rules. We also looked at the City of Wichita's fiscal agent agreement. They have some restrictions in there, as well as just looking at some of the other generic code of ethics that we have a lot of governmental entities around here. Then on the next page, some of the other items that are in the manual. We have very specific discipline steps: verbal reprimand, written reprimand, suspension, leading to termination. There is a grievance procedure outlined in there, layoff procedures if that was necessary. The reason this is called an operations manual instead of just an employee handbook manual is it also has provisions regarding financial management, procurement procedures, and reimbursement procedures. That's pretty much the manual. On the last page, I have described an item that is also in your packet, the very end of the packet, which is a separate standalone policy regarding the COVID-19 related leave. Earlier this year, the federal government passed the Families First Response Act, and that was requiring that for the rest of this year, from April 1st through December 31st, that certain employers provide paid family medical leave and paid sick leave under certain circumstances. These circumstances are generally an actual illness or someone who must stay at home because their children are there and school is out and they are not able to work from home at the same time. I didn't put these in the manual itself because this is a temporary law. It's going to expire at the end of the year, but you do need to have to address it in case you do have someone who becomes ill or has to deal with these circumstances. I did mention family medical leave here. It's not in the manual normally because as an employer, WAMPO does not qualify as an organization that has to provide family medical leave. That's usually applies only to employers with 50 or more employees, which of course WAMPO doesn't have. So that's why it's not in the manual itself, why there isn't family medical leave language in there. Do you have any questions, anybody? I went through that pretty fast. There's a lot to read.
Yes, I have a question concerning the COVID-related relief. Is there a provision there to get reimbursement from the federal government for that increased cost that will incur to WAMPO?
I didn't put that in the policy. I'm not sure there's a law for that. The act itself does provide provisions for tax benefits to employers, but I'm not sure WAMPO would be the kind of organization that's going to benefit from those kind of tax benefits.
I do know that the county and several of the municipalities have been applying for funds from the federal government for these additional costs. And I don't know if this would be one we could qualify with Sedgwick County, but might be something to look into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can make a note to look for that. I'm not familiar with it. Actually, at this point, I don't think that WAMPO has anybody that is going to qualify for any of these situations at this point. Obviously, we've got a long way to go this year, but at this point, I don't think WAMPO has suffered a loss.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Other questions for Kelly?
Kelly, I have a question, Kelly.
Sure.
It's Mike Moriarty with KDOT. Hey, I saw you had an email usage policy. Does that extend to social media as well? I'm just curious. I'm not worried about their social media. I'm just curious if that's part of the handbook here, or it's a manual, correct? Sorry.
Yes, it's a manual. Let me check here real quick. I know it's one draft it did and one draft it didn't, and I'm going to double check, make sure I got the right one here before I tell you. My recollection is that it is you can't represent yourself in social media as acting on behalf of WAMPO when it's just you.
Gotcha.
And I think that that's pretty much it. That might be in personal social media. That's what you're referring to, correct?
Yes, correct. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it, yeah.
Okay, other questions for Kelly? I don't see any other questions. So Chad, when do you want us to approve this for the TPB?
Thank you, Chairman. This is for review for the board members at this time, and next June 9th meeting would be the time for approval after any of your comments are incorporated by executive committee. Thank you, Chair.
Very good. Well, thank you, Chad. And like I say, the executive committee has looked at this several times. We have a large HR department here in Sedgwick County, and I had them review this entire document also. So it's been screened by a number of folks, but we need everyone to take a look at it closely so that we can approve it next month. Kelly, thank you very much for the presentation. I appreciate it.
Certainly.
Okay, next item is committee updates. First one is by Dan Wojak. He's not here, obviously, because I'm running the meeting today in his place. But at our last executive committee meeting, we talked about two main things. The first item was our employee manual, which you all have just heard about. The second item were membership fees in WAMPO. And Chad brought a proposal to look at possibly doubling the membership fees for WAMPO. It did not, it fell on kind of deaf ears, actually. I know that most of our organizations are going through some tough times right now. Sedgwick County and I'm sure the city of Wichita both are in the same position. We're losing a lot of money based on loss of revenue from sales tax and a number of other things. So at this time, I am not certain that we want to take any action on doubling the membership fees. I know for some of the smaller communities, it's not quite as large a hit, but for Wichita and Sedgwick County, it would have been about $40,000 additional, which is a pretty good hit right now, honestly. It doesn't sound like much when we got a budget as big as ours, but we're taking a big hit also. So right now, those were the two things that really we discussed during executive committee. Do any of the other members of the executive committee have anything they'd like to add?
No, that was perfect, David.
Very good. Well, thank you. The next item is from TAC. Troy, would you like to give an update for TAC?
Sure. A lot of what we went over was what we went over today with the MTP reimagined and the safety performance measures and such. So there really wasn't nothing that stuck out, I don't think, that would be helpful for this committee today. So I think we're good.
Very good. Thanks, Troy. Next, I haven't talked to Karen for some time. Karen Page from the Freight Committee. Are you online?
I am, Dennis. David, how are you?
Good.
How is everything? I've had the pleasure of watching so many of you on Facebook or YouTube channels, but I haven't got to see you live in a while. So it's a nice. Thanks, Chad, for having me present a little bit today. My job is just to give a quick update on the Freight Committee. Just 3 points for you. The first is that we did a lot of the work a couple of years ago. And then while Trans Systems really started digging in on doing the study and the reporting, our Freight Committee went on hiatus for about the last 18 months. Now we're re-engaged. We have a planned meeting upcoming on May 19th. We might need to move that around depending on what our final schedules are, but we'll be meeting again and probably quarterly, but probably a little more frequently now that Trans Systems is completing the study that goes into the final 2040 report. Wanted to remind everyone what the purpose of the Freight Committee is. It's a relatively new committee. And before I do that, I'll just address why am I the Freight Committee chairman, and I'll just tell you, I think it's because I raised my hand and said I'd be happy to help if I could. I know probably all of you understand that. I mean, you raise your hand either to be elected or just to try and help out. But originally, Chad's predecessor, Phil, and some of his staff reached out to me, and the reason they asked me to engage with the Freight Committee is because they heard me say more than once that if we're not moving goods, we're not exporting much in this region. And as you all heard me say that exporting is such a big part of our regional economy, they thought it would be a good fit. Some of the folks on here who are in transportation experts know that I am not, but I hope that adds a little bit of value when we're engaging with the private sector to my layman's view and my layman's questions. Certainly, I think they tolerate them very, very well, very professionally, but it really, I think, builds a bridge between our transportation engineers and the private sector companies who are actually moving freight. So back to the purpose, that is, our job is to look at the movement of freight or goods, whereas many of the things we've talked about today have been really about moving people. And so our primary concern exclusively is the movement of goods. And so we really need some private sector input. That brings me to my final point, which is to ask for your assistance. When we're on hiatus, we lost several private sector committee members, just really due to attrition. And so we need to kind of get back at it and start adding committee members. So I see several elected officials on. If you have someone in your district that you think would be a good representative from works at a company, maybe they're a logistics manager, maybe they're the shipping dock manager, maybe they're the CEO or the owner, would you let me know who that company is and who we should contact? You can either let me know or let Chad know. I think either of us are very much happy to reach out. And the rest of the folks who are on this Colin, and serving on this board, I know you know many company and private sector representatives. We currently have, I think, decent representation from private sector association type organizations like Greater Wichita Partnership and the Regional Chamber, who have been very, very helpful. But we really want to get to those private sector companies that if they can't move freight effectively and efficiently, then it's going to harm their bottom line. So I really would appreciate your recommendations. And don't worry about if they're on there or not. Chad and I will figure that out. We want to hear from you and hear what you think, who should be represented on that. Just a quick summary. The Freight Committee is re-engaged and will be meeting probably monthly right now, but planning for longer term quarterly meetings. The purpose is that we're completely focused on the movement of freight in the region, connecting that to the nation and the world, both ingoing and outgoing. And the third is my plea to you to share with me or with Chad recommendations from the private sector, companies that move goods around the region and the world that could be great representatives on the Freight Committee. And I thank you, Chairman and board members, for allowing me to provide you this update on the Freight Committee.
Well, thank you, Karen. Appreciate it. Any questions for Karen before we let her go? I don't see any. Well, thanks again, Karen. Appreciate what you're doing for us on the Freight Committee.
My pleasure.
Next item are partnership reports. The first one is from KDOT, and I didn't see Tom Hine on the roster of people. Tom, are you happen to be online? I did not see him when I went through the list of people that were on. If he shows up, we'll come back to him. Not, we'll move on to Mike Moriarty. I saw that he was on.
I am here. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just had a quick update for the group. So this Thursday, May 14th, Governor Kelly, Secretary Lorenz will be announcing the new highway expansion and modernization projects that have been selected for the KDOT project development pipeline. Just so I'm clear, these are not projects for construction. Rather, these are projects where we'll be beginning the engineering and design process. So we certainly encourage you to watch the announcement live if it works for you, and we will get a link sent out to the group here today for the event. Again, Thursday, May 14th, 10:30 a.m.
Very good. I did get an email about that, and I have it on my calendar. So if you'd send out the link to the rest of the folks in case they didn't get it, I appreciate it.
Will do.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. Next from Federal Highway Administration, Richard Buckland. I saw that you were on a moment ago. Let's see if you're still on.
Yes, Rick Backlund's on. Thank you. Yeah, I have a couple of updates. First, I'll start off with personnel. I believe probably some of you all are aware, but it's pretty much breaking news. But Paul Foundukas of my staff has received a promotion, and he's going to be joining our headquarters office of policy in highway information. So well-deserved for Paul. He has a real skill set in highway statistics, HPMS. So he literally just got the job last week. So I'm just letting you all know, we're real happy for Paul. He's going to continue working out of Topeka. He won't be going into DC. So he'll be going into what we call an alternative duty location at our office. So he will be effective in the new position starting on May 24th. So we'll be going through a period of transition to make sure that things continue, STIP approvals, MTP approvals, UPWP approvals. So no worries on that. And Paul will be, helping us through the transition. So again, real excitement for him. Our team leader for program delivery, which we used to call project delivery, is now on board, Richard Jury from our Federal Highways Oklahoma division. And Richard brings a lot of experience working in a wide variety of programs. So he is on board. And hopefully we should be making an announcement soon for our transportation engineer vacancy we'd announced earlier. A lot of discussion earlier about build grants. And yes, just wanted to put in a reminder for the upcoming May deadline. It's great to hear that the Wichita region is looking to compete for some projects. As you all are aware, there's about $1 billion in overall funding, with the $25 million limit that was mentioned earlier. So, definitely encourage you all to consider more applications if that works in the remaining time frame. Other news, reauthorization. On the reauthorization front, as most of you are aware, our FAST Act legislation expires on September 30th. Given all that's going on between COVID and the election, et cetera, we're just banking on probably a series of continuing resolutions after September 30th. There'll be a lot more activity, probably August, September timeframe, to see how long that CR will probably be and for how much money. But I don't foresee any interruptions to the program here. So that is big. As Mike Moriarty talked about, we're real excited about seeing KDOT's upcoming list of expanded projects, and we've been working very closely with them on their new program, Eisenhower Legacy. So that's what I have to report. Any questions or comments for me?
Any questions for Rick? I don't see any. Thank you very much for the update. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Dad, any other business we need to take care of today?
No, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, board members, for your leadership and guidance. Thank you so much. That's it.
Very good. Well, if nothing else, I will adjourn for today. We'll see you all in June. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today.
Thank you.